On New Year's Day 2009, in the quiet Florida town of Bradenton Beach, 22-year-old Sheena Morris, who had been staying with her 45-year-old fiancé, Joe Genoese, at a local hotel, is found dead in a shower with a blue dog leash around her neck. Local investigators quickly ruled the case a suicide.
They could not prove whether it was a homicide or suicide, but they claimed that it was a suicide. The reason they couldn't prove it is because the officers had provided false information.
After what can only be described as an incomplete investigation, the lead detective, Leonard Diaz, closes the case. But immediately, Sheena's family questions law enforcement's version of events. Sheena's mother, Kelly Osborn, begins her own investigation into the case. She tracks down leads and finds critical evidence the Bradenton Beach police missed or completely ignored.
There was absolutely nothing going on for years, and would refuse to, even though the medical examiner had changed the manner of death to undetermined, they still wouldn't do anything.
After years of fighting for Sheena's case to be reinvestigated, a local reporter, Lee Williams, hears about the case and begins his own investigation. He begins writing articles about his findings, and these articles catch the attention of the national media.
The alleged suicide was supposedly by hanging. That's somewhat unusual. But everything broke for me when I saw the photos. When I saw her in the shower and the position of her body, the position of her clothing, and found out there were petechial hemorrhages, I was hooked, because that immediately struck me, like a lot of experts, as a staged crime scene.
Suddenly, Sheena's friends and family are appearing on shows like 2020 and the Dr. Phil Show to talk about Sheena's case. This forces the state of Florida to reinvestigate. But shockingly, Florida Department of Law Enforcement comes to the very same conclusions as the Bradenton Beach Police, and to top it all off, finds nothing wrong with the work done by the lead investigator, Detective Leonard Diaz. This is a story of a fight that continues today and a family that will not give up hope in getting justice for their daughter. True cases.
The public police engages in a pattern and practice of using excessive force.
Real victims.
He's not all right. They were pounding him in the head.
Examined by two experienced investigators.
These cars shouldn't say to protect and serve, or they should be adding themselves on the bottom. It should say to protect and serve ourselves.
The missed clues.
Austin School Police acknowledging today that they should have done more to investigate whether a 4-year-old girl was sexually assaulted.
The cover-ups.
I think that there was a cover-up, and I think that people were looking out for their own skin.
From the extensive work by Salvatore Rastrelli and Ira B, these are the Archangels of Justice case files. Sheena Morris, the beautiful 22-year-old, met her 45-year-old fiancé, Joe Genoese, in 2006, 2 years before her untimely death. Sheena was very close with her family, even though Sheena's mother, Kelly Osborn, had left Syracuse, New York when Sheena was 12. Sheena stayed in close contact with her mother while she lived with her father, Dave Morris, and his wife, Lisa Lane, until she finished high school.
Sheena had lived with me until I believe she was 18 when she moved out of my house and actually moved down to Tampa. And at first she had moved in with her mother down there in Tampa before getting her own apartment. But she had lived with me, and I had her from, I think Kelly, her mom, had moved down to Florida when Sheena was 12. So Sheena lived with me full time from 12 years old to like 18 years old. We spoke on the phone every day after she moved to Florida. Once she moved to Florida, we still conversed every day, text all day long, back and forth to one another, and it was a continuous thing every day.
When Sheena moved to Florida, Kelly was delighted to have her daughter so close to her. Sheena and her mother would talk about everything.
Her and I personalities were very similar. We really couldn't hold much back. I kind of say what I think, and she definitely says what she thinks. And because we were so similar, sometimes it was difficult. Like when she was growing up as a teenager, which is typical for a lot of moms and daughters, we would clash. By the time she was 18, her and I were just, we were very similar and very close.
When Sheena and Genoese met, she was only 20 years old, and Genoese was 43. He had recently separated from his wife, but was still legally married. Joe Genoese immigrated from Italy when he was very young and had lived in Florida since he moved from Philadelphia. Sal talked to a friend of Genoese, John Ferentinos, in 2014.
How long you've known Joe Genoese, Joseph Genoese?
I've known Joe since probably when I was about 12 years old. I'm 32 now.
What kind of friendship did you have? What would you consider a friendship?
Well, my brother-in-law, after he finished the work for him, he actually hired him to work for his company as well. And we'd see each other. We'd go out, and I hung out with his son as well as hanging out with the family. I knew his ex-wife Gina, and my sister, and half the neighborhood, or half the kids I went to school with, or that were a little bit older than me, wound up working for Joe's painting company at the time, which was Bambini Paint at the time.
Was that in this area here?
Yes, it was in Kissimmee.
So you knew him from this area?
Yes.
Would you have any knowledge of him maybe selling steroids?
I don't know if he sold steroids. I know my brother-in-law Sam, when he was down here, he was doing steroids, and he was bulking up pretty fast. And around the same time, Joe was bulking up just as fast.
Mm.
So I mean, I'm not a scientist. I didn't give a drug test, but if you put two and two together, nobody bulks up that quick.
Yeah. But nobody ever said anything other than Sam. Sam you knew he was you.
Yeah, I knew right away because he told me everything. He never hired anything.
But and Joe didn't talk to you about.
No, but I knew Joe was doing drugs. God knows how long. Every time I seen Joe, he was smoking pot. Later on, we all did stupid stuff when we were younger. The extra, we went the extra mile on certain things. But otherwise, that's about it. I didn't know about the actual steroids, but I know on cocaine or pot, you don't bulk up in a matter of 2-3 months the way he was. I don't care if you're at the gym 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, you're not going to bulk up that much.
Sheena and Genoese were constantly fighting. They would break up and get back together multiple times over the 2 years they dated. Each time, Sheena's family would think this was the last.
I had to accept it. I just figured it would run its course and be over with, not like this. We would get along for the most part. Most of the time when they were over at the house, it was Sheena and my husband and I conversing and things, and most of the time he didn't have a whole lot of input on things. They always seemed to be arguing. When they got along, but, seeing your daughter in an unhealthy relationship is very hard, I don't want to see this fighting going on. That's just not good in any relationship. And it just seemed like, it was on again and off again too many times.
When they would break up, Sheena would move on and date other men. But Genoese could not move on and would always try to get her back.
Genoese was harassing her horribly, nonstop calling her, nonstop texting her, and to the point where it really, really upset her. Uh-huh. And she cried because he was harassing her. There was another time she was out to dinner on a date with one boyfriend named Cliff, and they were at a restaurant, and Genoese walked in and approached their table and said something to her boyfriend that, how does it make you feel that she's wearing a watch that I got her? After her death, I spoke to someone who explained to me that he had his private investigator following her. On another occasion, one of her friends, Rena, said that they were out somewhere and they saw him sitting in his car, stalking her, following her around.
During the winter of 2008, and in the middle of the ongoing litigation of his divorce, Joe Genoese proposes to Sheena. She accepts, much to her parents' displeasure.
Came on so quickly and was very odd. First of all, she's, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she becomes engaged, but it was no big engagement announcement, Never heard any story about some fantastic proposal or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think that was one of the oddest things, I guess, to me, was Sheena was very, grandiose when it came to big events in her life. So an engagement, I always thought that, I'd hear about it right away and that would be this big, elaborate story she'd tell me and all of this, right? So I mentioned how she came to New Orleans in the late summer of 2008, and I remember we were on Bourbon Street hanging out, and Joe said something that got Sheena upset, or vice versa, and so Sheena was outside the bar and Joe was inside, and I was kind of playing mediator again, and I went outside and was talking to Sheena, and I remember looking, and I'm still bad at this day, like I can't remember what ring means what and all of that, but I remember what finger is which and all of that. But I remember looking at her hand and seeing this giant ring, and I was, left hand, ring finger. I think, are you engaged? And, that's how I found out that Sheena was engaged. And so that was really strange that I realized it, and she didn't, go out of her way to break the news to me.
Sheena quickly began planning the wedding. Everything was happening so fast, but she knew exactly where she wanted to have the ceremony. It was one of her favorite places, Bradenton Beach, Florida, on Anna Maria Island. Her mother was still trying to accept the fact that they were engaged, but continued to support her daughter and helped with the wedding.
And then so this starts happening, and Sheena and I are in a Target, and she says, Mom, I need you to handle these invitations. I know you can do these. These are what I want. And, because she knew I could print them on the computer and things like that. And so there was really not excitement about it, and I even exchanged an email with her, like, what's good? Why don't you take some time and wait? This all of a sudden, putting this together over the next, 6 months is, it's not necessary. Just give this some time. And so she was like, it wasn't an exciting thing. Like, she showed me centerpieces that she wanted on the table. And so that part as mother and daughter was kind of fun. But like when she'd send an email off to her friends' wedding, her friends that would be in the wedding party, she seemed aggravated. And like it was a big pain in the neck.
While Sheena was busy planning the wedding, one of her best friends, Kelly Holland, was back from college visiting her and Genoese, and Sheena received a text from one of her ex-boyfriends.
While I was on that trip to Tampa, Sal, who I became friends with while she was dating Sheena, heard that I was in town, so he reached out to Sheena because he didn't have my number to try and get in touch with me, and that came out while we were on our drive to dinner one night, and Joe immediately reacted very jealously in a way that I had never seen him act before prior to this, and so it caught me off guard. I really didn't know if it was just like a joke. I remember thinking, like, oh, he's just joking, he's not actually mad about that, and I remember having to try and calm him down and say, hey man, like this wasn't trying to, get a hold of Sheena or trying to get back with Sheena. It was clearly just he was trying to get my phone number. And anyway, so he kept blowing it way out of proportion, and he ended up turning the vehicle around, and then, basically, our evening plans are scrapped for the night. But as we drove back to Sheena's apartment, he was getting more and more heated about the fact that Sal called Sheena, and he basically wasn't going to stand for it. So he got Sheena to call Sal back.
With each other, started yelling at each other, screaming at each other, wanting to fight each other, and got so crazy that Joe ended up pulling a gun out of the glove box. Ex-boyfriend was not around, but they were trying to find each other and fight that night. I remember Sheena running up into her apartment, and I remember she locked herself in there because I went to knock on it later and it was locked, and she told me that Joe was not coming in here with the gun. So he did come up to the apartment, and I remember locking, I came out, told him that you can't, I locked the door behind me, told him you can't come in here with the gun. We talked for a few minutes. Joe eventually put the gun away. I walked down to the car with him, put the gun back in the car, and then we walked in, went in the house and kind of talked over the situation. had Joe kind of realize that he made a bigger deal out of the situation than it really was, and eventually apologized. We went out later that night.
Do you recall that, or you don't?
I don't remember the gun part, to tell you the truth. I don't remember bringing a gun up and pulling a gun out and all that.
You had it like in your belt behind your back. I saw you put it there.
I mean, sometimes I carried it where it was in the glove box. The point of the matter is I had a concealed weapons license, okay? But I don't remember waving the gun around or anything like that.
Sal says Joe had a threatening demeanor and always acted as if he owned Sheena. That's how he describes you. He's joining us today on Polycom. So, Sal, you're there. We're talking here about the fact that there was a night, according to Kelly, that Joe was looking for you while he was wearing a gun and that it could have gotten bad. Did you know you were being looked for that night, and what do you have to say about this?
His whole demeanor, with the conversation we had, pretty much came off as a thug.
Did he call you and tell you to stop talking to his fiancée?
Yes, he did.
And if you did not, what did he say would happen?
Pretty much threatening my life that he'll find me and he'll take care of the situation.
Do you recall that exchange?
Yes, I do. The point of the matter is I called him, I asked him very nicely, I said, look, me and Sheena are engaged now, and you really need to stop calling her, because she doesn't want you to call her anymore. And she was like, you need to leave me alone, etc. And he just wasn't listening to her. So I took the phone and I said, look, we're engaged now. And he basically turned around and says, I don't care what you are. So I think any typical man will get a little upset when you ask a man to stop calling his fiancée that now you're engaged. And he basically told me to go myself.
Genoese liked to be in control and was going through a bitter divorce with his soon-to-be ex-wife. He would lie to the court about his finances and even got Sheena dragged into the ongoing court battle by paying for all of her living expenses.
She did lie for him in the deposition and I was very upset about this when I found out about it. Things like, he was paying for her apartment, and because he was controlling, he liked it like that. Another example was she needed a new car. And so he agreed that he would pay for it, but it needed to go into Sheena's name, and my husband had to co-sign for it.
Well, Joe said that he could not co-sign for Sheena's loan on the car because he was still going through a divorce. And here's a guy dating somebody else and wanting to get married before he even finishes his divorce. And I said, well, no problem, Joe. I'll do it for Sheena. If you don't want her to work, then if you're going to pay for it, I'll co-sign for it. I'll be responsible for it, but just make sure you pay for it. And then when Sheena passed, I talked to Joe about it. He's like, not my problem.
Sheena usually spent Christmas with her father in upstate New York, but this year wanted to stay in Florida with her new fiancé, despite the best efforts from Dave's wife and Sheena's stepmom, Lisa Lane.
Because I had been trying to talk Sheena into coming home for Christmas, but I wanted it to be a surprise for her father. And she was so sad because she didn't want to come. She wanted to come home, but she didn't want to come home at the same time. She didn't want to leave Joe for some stupid reason. And she knew that her cousin was having the baby, and she knew that she was going to be up in Syracuse when she had the baby, so she didn't want to do it twice. So I guess the rotten person that I am, I kept trying to talk her into it and sending her texts and calling her. It's like, come on, Sheenie, please come home. And she'd say, no, Lisa, I can't. I can't leave Joe. It's my responsibility. I'm the only one he has. I can't leave him. But then I understood, she did what any responsible person would do.
December 19th, Sheena and Genoese went to New York City to celebrate his 45th birthday. They got back a few days later, and on the morning of December 23rd, Sheena comes over to her mother's house.
Just a few days before Christmas, they had gotten into an argument in the morning. He had spent the night at her house, and she comes over, and I remember it being about 9:30, and she comes walking in the door, and I'm like, wow, what are you doing here so early? And so she tells it, she's just like, kind of like, oh, he's such a jerk, he got on my nerves. And, you know, so they're in another argument. And I was at my counter working, and she goes, put this stuff away. She goes, nobody's buying houses right now. It's Christmas time. Let's go shopping. So she wanted to go Christmas shopping, and we spent that whole day together just laughing and joking. And, you know, we picked out some really funny kind of clothes and just kind of mocking certain things out and just having a fun day. And during that whole day, her phone is going off like crazy. And it was Genoese. And she wouldn't answer it. She just was like, I'm not talking to him. But she wasn't upset. She wasn't, she's just like, she was just blowing him off. So I remember driving down the street. She's in the passenger seat. And just something we always did. We always held hands, and even as older. And so she puts her hand on mine just like she did when she was a kid, and there's her ring. And I said, did you ever get that checked out? You think that's real? And she goes, no, I don't think it's real. And, you know, then after her death, I found out from one of her friends named Justina that Genoese gave this whole story about the diamond being so special, coming from some prince from some other country or something strange like that. It was really odd. And, you know, so Sheena never did have it checked out or anything like that. But, you know, she had a pretty good idea it wasn't real.
Because Sheena was not going to spend Christmas in New York with her father, Kelly called Genoese to make sure that they both came over and spent Christmas at Kelly's home.
Well, because Genoese and her were in an argument, I didn't know. That morning, I called Genoese, or I don't know if he had called me, and I made the statement. I called him. I said, you know, because she wasn't answering the phone, and I'm like, you know, I called Genoese and I said, I'm going to tell you something right now. My daughter better be at this house for Christmas, or I'm going to hold you fully responsible. You make sure that my daughter is here. First, when they arrived, it was kind of uncomfortable because you can tell that they were not speaking. And Genoese knew that I was very serious. And so he had her come. As time went on, you know, I mean, my husband, he's always very funny and stuff. Just kind of broke up that whole tension thing. And before you knew it, you know, she had her 2 dogs, and then there was my golden retriever. So now, you know, the dogs are opening their presents, and we're videotaping, and, you know, all of a sudden, everything was just that normal Christmas spirit.
As everyone is opening presents on Christmas Day, Genoese surprises them and again proposes to Sheena in front of her family.
Hey, you need to take that ring off this first time.
They got a safety thing on it?
Because it doesn't look good. I haven't done this yet, but... Oh, you?
But like what?
Marry me.
Yes, of course.
That was a really odd thing. And it just, you know, I never ever have a video camera out. I don't know why I did, but I did. You know, and of course then we didn't have these kind of phones to be doing videos like we do now. And so I was just playing around with it, and, you know, just we're trying to keep things light. And so all of a sudden he just gets down and then does this proposal thing. The only thing I can think of, and it was just so odd, the only thing I can think of was, you know, that they had called it off and broke the engagement because they had been fighting, and maybe he re-proposed again. But still, I mean, it's just odd, and we never knew of any spectacular proposal to begin with the first time around. So it's just very unusual. It was almost like I felt like the only reason it happened was because it was on video.
After the proposal, Genoese and Sheena spend time with the family. But after they get back home, there's another argument, and Sheena calls off the engagement.
They had gotten into an argument again. I heard that she was on the phone talking with friends. Heard that Genoese took her 2 dogs from her that night, but then arrived real early in the morning and brought them back. So it's kind of like he would take something from her that she loved so much to punish her.
A few days after Christmas, Sheena expresses relief to a friend the relationship had ended and she could start dating men her own age. As Genoese continues to pursue Sheena, she refuses his advances, but eventually relents after he makes plans to take her to the place they were going to marry in Bradenton Beach. According to the text messages from Sheena's phone, she did not initially want to go because the hotel they would be staying at was not pet friendly, and she didn't want to leave her 2 Yorkies, or babies as she called them, behind. Genoese tells Sheena that they can sneak the dogs into the hotel, and she finally agrees to come. Her mother was very confused by this, because she had planned to spend the new year with Sheena and thought the relationship with Genoese was ending.
I remember I was on my way to a closing, and I get a text message, and it comes through about going to Anna Maria Island on New Year's or New Year's Eve. And I'm like, first I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. She's supposed to be coming over to my house on New Year's. And I knew, she had said to me, she goes, Mom, I had a client that I sold them the land, and they had built this magnificent estate on. So we were invited to go there. And I said, this is business. We'll be back at the house by 11 o'clock. We'll have Grandma there, and we'll all ring in the new year together. And she's like, but Mom, you never ever go anywhere on New Year's. You always stay home, trying to talk me out of going.
On December 29th, Sheena attended a celebration of life for her friend Kyle Locke, who had passed away the year before.
She was actually, helping the mother put it together and bring the friends together. And, the photos and things show that it was a gathering of friends and everybody was enjoying themselves. And so I talked to her friend, Lily, and she's like, no, she goes, I mean, obviously, it's a sad thing that you're, having a celebration of life for someone, but nobody was distraught or upset. They were all looking at pictures and had a little slideshow going and things like that.
The Bradenton Beach Police and the FDLE will use this celebration of life that Sheena attended as proof that she was depressed during the holiday season, but that could not be further from the truth. The next day, December 30th, and just hours before Sheena left for Bradenton Beach, she came over to Kelly's house. Kelly didn't know it at the time, but this was the last time she would see her daughter alive. Sheena was excitedly making plans for the new year and was very enthusiastic about flying to New York to help her cousin Ashley after she had her baby.
She had just renewed her AAA on her car. When I got to her apartment, she already had her rent check filled out. So probably when she got back, she would just bring it to the office. She had just ordered her new subscription for her Glamour magazine. Father has a text message in his phone from New Year's Eve that she just signed up for, I think, a bridal fair or something like this at Anna Maria Island. Then I had gotten an email from one of her friends I didn't even know, and he was basically stating he's confused because they had plans.
All of these events go unmentioned in both the Bradenton Beach Police Department's and the FDLE's final report. After Sheena and Genoese leave, Kelly receives a mysterious fax. When she reads it, she's very confused how a quote from Genoese's company was was sent to her.
No, I can't figure it out. And you know, because when we got that fax, it was New Year's Eve. I couldn't understand why it was coming to my fax. First of all, we didn't even use a fax. We didn't use a home phone. So I don't even know how he would have gotten that number, or his company would have gotten that number. I just very confused about it. And so at first I'm like, you know what? I'm not calling. I'm not texting him to let him know about it. And then it was annoying me. It was annoying me because I know that, you know, being in real estate, if, you know, I'm a business owner, so if this business fax was sent to a wrong person, I would need to know about that.
Yeah.
So it ate at me, and I'm like, well, if this is a business fax, then he needs to know about it. But the problem with me calling or texting, it was only going to make Sheena mad at me, you know? And it's almost like that's what he wanted to do. He wanted Sheena to be mad at me so that he could get her to go to Anna Maria Island.
The next day, Sheena and Genoese go shopping in the coastal tourist town of Bradenton Beach, and according to receipts, spend $821 in cash on shoes and clothes. Meanwhile, in Tampa, Kelly starts receiving bizarre texts from Genoese. These texts seem to originate from Sheena's phone, but are forwarded through Genoese to Kelly.
So I couldn't understand why I was getting these texts. And then I never did understand it. So I was driving and I wasn't going to text, so I just pick up the phone and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Who's texting who? And he's like, and I could never figure out. And then I remember Art Brown had asked me something early on, and he said, is it possible that he accidentally forwarded those text messages to you, and that they could have been meant for someone else? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. That makes sense.
After Kelly speaks with Genoese to figure out what is going on, Kelly sends a text to Genoese telling him about the fax. He responds by saying, quote, "Stay out of our lives." Kelly has had enough and doesn't respond. According to witnesses, Sheena and Genoese spend the new year at the Beach House restaurant. Kelly spoke with the waitress that served them that night.
I had asked, you know, I was asking, you know, questions for her to, you know, tell me about. And I said, you know, are you sure that was you? I'm showing a picture. You're sure that this is my daughter? To make sure that we were talking about the same two people, I said, okay, let me ask you a question. What were they drinking? And she said, well, Sheena was drinking a pina colada. I'm like, nope. I said, that's not her. And she goes, well, at first she ordered a Kettle One and Red Bull. I said, oh, okay. I said, and what happened? And she said that she explained that they didn't have any Red Bull. And I said, what was her demeanor like? Because this is going to tell me a lot. Because I know she would have been outward enough to say that, especially if she was in a bad mood.
Mm-hmm.
And when she explained to me, the waitress explained to me, she goes, I offered to go across the street to the convenience store to get some. And she goes, oh, no, don't worry about it. And then she just ordered that. So obviously, and she said, you know, well, I'll send him, you know, if I need to. And so I'm like going, okay, so that shows me she was in a good mood. She explains to me that she was just happy as could be. She said it was very odd because here she is all smiling and really nice. She said, I knew I was going to have a really good tip. And she said, I just remember how beautiful she was. Mm-hmm. And she goes, but it was so opposite because he just sat there slouched over in his chair, smoking his cigar, drinking his vanilla Stoli with diet, and that they were doubles.
While they are at the restaurant, Sheena sent several text messages to her friends and family.
here Sheena was all happy about New Year's, texting all her friends, and that was one of the things that Genoese was complaining about. But he was the one just sitting there moped over in his drinks. So, you know, but New Year's is a time of happiness, and there she was, you know, all these people that she knows and loves that she's texting with.
I'll never forget the text she sent me in. It said, Happy New Year's, here's to another great year of friendship. That was it. And then I replied something about, you know, hell yeah, can't wait to see you at Mardi Gras, basically, something along those lines. And I think she replied after that, but I can't recall for sure. But basically, she seemed to be in good spirits. I remember, you know, after we talked and she told me that they broke up, you know, I feel like we texted and she was saying that they were getting back together and, you know, things were going to be great and all of that. And then I remember seeing, you know, dating the story, obviously, but a MySpace post, I'm going to guess her last one, was basically that, you know, you're not going to find her tonight and that she's going to go, you know, to the island with her love or the beach with her love or something like that. So to me, I was like, I remember looking at that and saying, okay, like Sheena's, you know, back and, you know, all of that, and she's happy and, you know, all and everything. And then when I saw that text wishing me a happy new year, I you know, to me it was a reinforcement on that thought that I had, that, you know, I wasn't going to try and reach Sheena because it said, you know, you're not going to find me tonight or something like that. I just figured I'd talk to her the next day or in a couple of days. We didn't talk every single day, but you know, on New Year's, I would expect typically for us to text, and I was glad that we did that night. But yeah, she seemed to be in good spirits that night and seemed like she was probably having a good time, and she was excited about the plans that they had created for their kind of getaway.
These text messages and Sheena's excitement about her soon-to-be-born niece are once again not mentioned or considered by Detective Diaz or the investigators with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. According to reports, after the fireworks, Sheena and Genoese returned to their room at the Bridgewalk Resort. After an hour or so, they are heard by multiple hotel guests arguing. It doesn't stop for some time and gets so loud the police are eventually called by the concerned hotel guests.
Manatee County 911, what is the address of the emergency?
Bridgewalk Landmark Resort in Bradenton Beach.
Okay, do you have a address or an apartment number?
Yeah, I think it's 100 Bridge Street, and the room number is 525, I think. There's some kind of, we're in the room next door, and there's some kind of a domestic thing going on.
Okay, what's the phone number you're calling from?
I don't know. It's a motel room phone.
I understand.
And there's two people over there just screaming and yelling, a woman and a man at each other.
Do you know if anyone has any weapons or if
I don't think so. Well, she's hollering at him about money, and he's hollering. I don't know.
When these hotel guests are interviewed by the police, they say the fight was about money. But according to Genoese, it was because he called his kids after 1 a.m. to wish them a happy new year, and Sheena got angry. During the argument, one of the hotel guests, who was staying in the room next door, overheard some of the conversation and talked with attorney Art Brown about it.
During the time they were arguing, I take it you could hear her voice and her words fairly clearly.
It seems so.
And his voice, I understand it was lower in tone. Could you hear what he was saying clearly, or just selected portions?
The only thing I ever heard him say
was, "I want my money back, bitch"?
Yeah,
okay.
But in a very monotone, seemed like no emotion. I mean, you know, it was shocking to me in a way because I'm thinking, she's so angry. Mm-hmm. And he's just like, "Oh, I want my money back, bitch." You know, and I'm like, it just didn't seem appropriate for her being so angry that he was so monotone.
Now, in the aftermath of this, did you write down any notes or anything, or did you compile any kind of file on this?
I had some notes, and I have not been able to find them.
Okay.
I've moved twice, and I was going to try to find them when Kelly Osborn originally was contacting me, but I couldn't seem to locate them. So.
Okay. And were they written down shortly after the events that you're testifying about?
Yeah.
While it was fresh in your mind?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I had worked at Safe Place Rape and Crisis Center, and I remember telling Michael to call the police. I said, because, and I did listen, I said, because this is how people wind up dead. I said, call the police. And yeah, she was mad as hell. You hear Sheena yelling, get your hands off my neck, get your hands off my neck. Then she hears Sheena yell, look at what you did to my body. Was it worth $100?
Do you remember the comment, get your hands off my neck? Do you believe that you reported that to Mrs. Osborn?
No. You know what seems to stick in my mind? And I thought when you said before what you did to my body sounded a little off key. I think the whole thing was about her neck. She was saying, or maybe she said something like, did you see what you did to my body? And did you see what you did? Did you see what you did to my neck?
Okay, so
I
you
do
believe...
remember hearing the word neck, but I didn't hear him to get his hands off. I just heard, did you see what you did to my body?
Neck. Okay,
my neck.
That's fine.
Okay, but not get your hands off. And she may have said something. Was that worth $100? Or did you see what you did to my neck? Joe says in a mumbled tone, give me back my money, bitch. Yep. Sheena says, I don't have your money. I lost it on the beach. They said I had a fight on the beach. Yeah, I did hear that.
Genoese is never questioned by either the Bradenton Beach Police or the FDLE about this discrepancy. After the 911 calls come through, two officers, Mike Basil and John Securi, respond within minutes. As they walk up to the room causing the disturbance, they pass a man coming down the stairs. It was Joe Genoese, but instead of stopping him, the officers proceed to hotel room 525. Genoese gets in his car and drives away. This is the first, but certainly not the last instance of the Bradenton Beach Police Department not doing their job. Next, according to the officers' report that they filed a full 3 days after this encounter, they met with Sheena at the door and speak with her for a few minutes. Both officers did note the marks on Sheena's body. Sheena tells them they came from an altercation with Genoese. When Sheena describes him and his car, the two officers then realized the man they had passed just a few minutes earlier was in fact Joe Genoese. Some of this conversation was overheard by the same hotel guest who called the police.
It states that it sounds like the police were treating Sheena more like a prostitute. I did. I thought she was a prostitute because I'm thinking, well, they're asking where's his belongings, and he's talking about $100. So my logic just went to, well, maybe that was a prostitution situation. I didn't say they were treating her like that, but the question made me think that. Police questioned Sheena. Oh yeah, where's the suitcase? Yep, suitcase belongings or his bag. I think something like that. But she explains police last. Sheena called someone telling them what had just happened. This was her 911 call. Yeah, I did hear her talking to someone on the phone in a very kind of quiet tone. And
the officer's report paints a much different picture. They state that Sheena was, quote, extremely emotional upon first contact, but, quote, rational and calm during the interview. They also reported that Sheena did not appear intoxicated. Officer Mike Basil reported that Sheena claimed that, quote, she just needed someone to talk to, so she called the police. According to the officer's report, Sheena then showed them the mark on her neck, but would not definitively explain its cause. Yet in the very next sentence, the officer stated that Sheena claimed that Genoese was, quote, flinging his arms around during the argument, and his watch may have hit her. Well, which is it? Did she explain the mark or not? This is another one of the many contradictions in both the Bradenton Beach Police and the FDLE's investigation. The officer's report continues, and they claim that Sheena stated that the argument involved a disagreement about going out for a drink and money. She told the officers that the $100 of her money that was taken by Genoese had been a gift from her father. According to the officers, Sheena did not report domestic violence and did not complete an affidavit with respect to the incident. Other than the noted mark on Sheena's neck, they reported observing no injuries to Sheena and, quote, no sign of violence in the room. These officers reported that Sheena made several statements during their contact with her. This included that her father had given her a signed $100 bill for Christmas with the promise to double it if she still had it the next time they saw each other. That she was a trust fund baby and owned her house in Tampa. She received one of her dogs as a gift when she was hospitalized regarding a seizure. Her mother had given it to her. Next, the officers stated that they could call Sheena's family to come get her, and this is what she said to that. Her father lived 3,000 miles away, and she had not spoken to her mother in 10 years. The officers then claimed that they saw open beer cans in the room. Not only did Sheena not drink beer, no beer cans were ever found in the room. They notified the dispatcher to change the title of call from domestic to disturbance, and then they returned to duty.
You know, the first thing they should have done was stop Genoese and talk to him and find out if he was a part of this domestic. And if he was, hold him there and go up and interview the young lady who's now up there alive and well, all scratched up and beat up. And you've got a domestic battery on your hands. See, if they had done that, grabbed him, went up there, talked to her, they could have made an arrest right there. So it could have prevented him from driving away drunk and possibly killing an innocent person on the road because he was DUI. She said he was drunk when he left. They didn't bother to investigate. They didn't bother to call out to additional units on the road and say, look, we got a white Mercedes convertible with a 40-something-year-old guy with black curly hair driving, leaving the island. It's an island, for crying out loud. It's not like we're talking New York City with 100 million different exits out of the town. This is just an island, you know, it's just a little tiny island, and it only has 2 bridges going off of it. Like, it's not too hard to find a white Mercedes at 2 a.m. It lessens the severity of the crime. You know, a disturbance is, you know, the dog barking, a cat barking, you know, making a nuisance of itself. People yelling.
And you don't write a report on a disturbance.
Yeah, there's nothing to it because they didn't want to write a report. My attitude was, like I said to Ira, and I said this before, it's New Year's Eve. There's a lot of action going on. It's a party town that time of the year. And they were too busy. They didn't want to be bothered. They want to get back out on the street and go see what they could see. They figured out, this is no big deal.
Florida law states that domestic violence is defined as any assault or criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death of a household member by another household member. This criteria was witnessed by both officers according to their own reports. Also, according to Florida law, an arrest will be made if there is probable cause to believe that a person has committed an act of domestic or dating violence. The decision to arrest shall not require the consent of the victim or consideration of the relationship of the parties. So, according to the law these officers are sworn to uphold, they should have at least had Genoese arrested and brought in for questioning. After Sheena spoke with the officers, and unknown to the Bradenton Beach Police during their initial investigation, Sheena makes a 911 call to her home county sheriff's office.
911, what's the emergency?
Osborn County, this is Manatee County. I'm transferring a caller reference a domestic situation.
Send it over.
Thank you. Ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sheena. I'm in Manatee County right now. I was on vacation for the holiday with my fiancé. And we have 2 separate homes. He's on the way to my home apparently right now. He took off with my car keys and my house keys. And he said he was going to destroy my house. He left here probably about half an hour ago. I had deputies come out here because he did physically hurt me. And they couldn't. No, we do not live together. He has his own residence, own mailing address, everything. He does not have permission to enter my home. He doesn't even have his own key.
Okay, what is his name?
His name is Joe Genoese, Genoese.
What does he drive?
He drives a white convertible Mercedes.
And about how old is he?
45.
White, black, Hispanic?
He's white. He's about 5'4" with short brown curly hair. He's Italian. I filled out a police report here in Manatee County because he did make me bleed and left claw marks all over me and stuff. I filled out a police report here about 30 minutes ago, but I just called him and said, you know, how could you leave me here? You took my keys, you took my money, you took everything, because he took my entire purse. And now he's like, I'm going to go to your house and ruin your house. You ruined my life. And I just do not want him entering my home. And I don't even have a way to get near my home or get even enter my own home because...
Okay, we'll be on the way there to go check up on it, okay?
Thank you.
Does that sound like a woman who, according to both the Bradenton Beach Police and the FDLE, will violently kill herself a few hours later? The only claim in the officer's report that is true is a story about the $100 from her father. Everything else is flat out wrong. The Bradenton Beach Police and the FDLE will use these falsehoods attributed to Sheena to dismiss the claims she made on her 911 call, including that she did indeed fill out a police report and that Genoese took her purse. Again, I must reiterate, the officer's report was not completed for a full 3 days after Sheena's death. And here's the kicker. Even though the Bradenton Beach Police and Detective Diaz had Sheena's phone and went through it, they did not know about the 911 call for nearly a week. So when they filled out their reports, they had no idea what Sheena had said to the Hillsborough County Sheriffs. My question to you, the viewer, is, who has more to gain from lying? Sheena, who according to officers lied about meaningless stories for attention, or the officers, who did nothing after speaking with a domestic violence victim who turned up dead a few hours later? Also, the fact that the lead detective, Leonard Diaz, did not know about the 911 call before he completed his investigation and that this call was discovered by Sheena's mother goes unmentioned in all the subsequent official investigations, and Detective Diaz never answers for this glaring oversight. Nor do the officers, Basil and Sakiri, ever answer for not bringing Genoese in for questioning about domestic violence. To our knowledge, both officers still work for the Bradenton Beach Police, and during Lee Williams' investigation of this case, he found this out about Officer Mike Basil.
Basil went to a rape crisis center on duty, and at some point walks across the room and kisses a counselor in a rape crisis center. I mean, this whole police department out there, when we were doing this investigation, we were referring to it as the island of broken toys. I mean, all of their officers have issues with their past.
It doesn't stop there with Officer Mike Basil. In July of 2016, he was involved in a brawl while off duty at a bar that was so bad that it forced the department to change its policy. After Sheena finishes her 911 call, she then calls and texts her fiancé.
So at 1:46, she sent, "I can't believe you just fucking left me here." At 1:52, "I took pictures." At 1:53, "You're evil and scary." At 2:12, after she called and made a 911 call, "Police are going to my house, have the gate code, they will not let you in. They know your name, age, height, hair, race, and car, just so you know. Your better bet is to stop being an alpha male and stop putting your hands on women." At 2:12, they also have my phone number. At 2:27, she texts. This is the last text that she writes. "Stuck here, I have no way home. You can't leave me here." Then there's no text from him until 2:28. "I don't want to be with someone like you. I deserve better." At 2:37, "I'm done, Sheena. I'm not living like this. I'm out of your bubble. You don't have to push me away anymore." At 2:43, "Great, Sheena, take pictures. Nothing will get me back. You chose to be a little girl, a hypocrite. You can have your bubble and your threats." 2:49, Genoese text. "I'm normal. You know what that means." 2:55 a.m. "You chose to stay. I offered to take you home after you told me you wanted to go, but you chose to stay. I'm done with this. Call me when you're a woman and grow up."
These text messages do not go back and forth. Sheena sends her text, then his are sent. After the communication with Genoese, Sheena does not make any other calls or send any text. According to the Bradenton Beach Police and the FDLE, Sheena hangs herself shortly after. At 4:48 a.m., Sheena's phone receives a text letting her know that her cousin has just given birth to a healthy baby girl. Sheena never sees this text message.